The Russian army is actively storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Vremevsky salient and preparing for an offensive near Gulyapol and Orakhovo. Ukrainian armed forces. The Olginsky forest, clearing complete. While recording the video, an update came in confirming that the clearing operation in the greater Olginsky forest and nearby tree plantations from remnants of enemy forces has been completed. No significant changes here for now. In the Darino area, the enemy remains entrenched at the farm in the southern part of the village. There are attempts to advance into Nikolayevo Darino, but they have yet to gain a foothold. Lower Klin is under our control. We are attempting to advance further, but without notable success so far. These two maneuvers aim to disrupt the enemy's logistics at the farms in Darino. However, as I said, no significant breakthroughs yet. No changes in Novoivanovka either. The enemy tests our defenses daily, but is consistently pushed back with losses. Fierce battles for the Zauskolye district continue. The enemy is committing reserves here, trying to regain previously lost positions. It seems the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command has a direct order from Zelensky to retake the area at all costs. Our units, holding strong in the center, continue to clear the flanks and improve logistics. However, it is too early to speak of a stable situation. This is still a back-and-forth struggle. A decisive battle is underway for the refractory plant. The enemy resists fiercely but is forced to retreat as their defenses crumble. A key factor here, as even enemy sources note, is the loss of positions west of Klishchivka. The main limiting factor for us here has always been logistics. Troops had to walk long distances for rotation under enemy drone attacks originating from this area. Now, with that position gone, transferring reinforcements and forming assault units has become much easier, leading to our successes in the city center. It seems unlikely the UAF will hold the city for long. Our recent progress has not only simplified our logistics, but also complicated theirs. Even the rushed deployment and counterattacks of the UAF's 12th National Guard Brigade, Azov, brought in from Toretsk for reinforcement, failed to turn the tide, although it has slowed our advance here. Toretsk Frontline as of 19 November 2024. The storming of Toretsk continues. After the enemy redirected the 12th National Guard Brigade, Azov, to Chasiv Yar, facing a looming disaster in the north, the situation for the UAF in Toretsk has deteriorated rapidly. The remaining forces are clearly unable to hold back our advance, and the enemy is losing control of various blocks almost daily. Yesterday we continued to push forward, both in the city center, toward the Toretsk mine, and in the Zabalk area, toward the central mine spoil heaps. In the former, we have already moved past high-rise buildings and entered the northern outskirts, characterized by 1- and 2-story houses. Enemy sources suggest that without fresh and strong reinforcements, the UAF may lose control of the remaining part of the city. Selidovo-Kurakhove Frontline as of the morning of 20 November 2024. Where it's weak, it breaks. Yesterday's events on this front confirm the saying, where it's weak, it breaks. After our successes near Berestki and a direct threat to Starya Turny, the enemy transferred reserves to stabilize the front. But as shown in a previous update, this created a gap in Kurakhove itself, which was exploited by our 114th Brigade, capturing the grain elevator area and, by morning, the first high-rises. Meanwhile, the situation for the enemy in Berestki is dire. By evening, they held only its far western edge and will likely lose it today. Beyond that lies the hill of Starya Turny. Considering Kurakhovo's collapse, this village is losing strategic importance, and our efforts here are shifting north toward the settlement of Zarya. Yesterday, after a brief pause, our forces resumed offensive actions in this area, which will likely soon reflect on the map. South Kurakhove Frontline, as of the morning of the 20th of November 2024. UAF's agony on the river Suki Yali. Everything eventually comes to its logical conclusion. It seems the UAF grouping, 79th Brigade, on the Suki Yali River is nearing its end. Yesterday, our forces advanced to the river from Trudovoye. According to enemy sources, only this small stream separates us from Uspanovka. Our units also reached Yelizavetovka and the nearby hamlet Vesyoli Gai along a broad front. The same is happening in the north. Thus, we have squeezed the enemy toward the river on both sides, with all retreat routes under our fire control, further worsening the situation for this UAF grouping. Moreover, they have logistics. Very weak, but they do exist, and this is the main thing here. And accordingly, we have almost no control over private houses that are located on the very edge of the city from the east. In short, a second aggregate plant, like in Vovchansk, did not work out. Situation on Toretsk front. Russian army took full control over Avangard Stadium and advanced north of Hrushevskoho Avenue, reaching Svitla Street. The advance of the Russian armed forces in Chasiv is directly correlated with the gradual loss of the Klishchevsky bridgehead. Unfortunately, there is nothing surprising in this. We must prepare for the defense of Stupochki and frontal approaches to Kostiantynivka. In Chasiv, by and large, there is only 1 point left for more or less stable defense. This is a refractory plant. The realities are such that you can build fortifications for months, and then, in a few days, it will be demolished by FABs. Chasiv Yar. The Russian armed forces have broken through the defenses of the Ukrainian Cossacks and started fighting for the refractory plant. The loss of this line and the adjacent high-rises will not allow us to hold other parts of the city. We will be forced to retreat to Kostiantynivka as well as to Kram and Druzhkivka. To Toretsk, the same situation, the Russian armed forces have advanced in the high-rise part of the center of Toretsk. If the Russian armed forces can push further, it will be very difficult to hold on. They also need to try to overcome us in the area of the central mine, which we are currently holding on to. Situation on Northeastern front. During the last 7 days, Russian army completely captured the northern forest of Kolesnikivka and entered in the village of Zhivotivka. Additionally, yesterday, the soldiers of the 114th Guards Brigade performed a heroic feat as always. Using boats, they crossed the Kurakhove Reservoir and, by evening, captured the Kurakhove grain elevator, shifting the fighting to the city's central area. The UAF has concentrated its forces in a small high-rise district, launching counterattacks to prevent us from solidifying control. However, by morning, our forces advanced further, securing the local market and the first high-rises. Overall, the enemy's situation here continues to deteriorate, increasingly resembling an outright collapse. Every day, Russian troops conduct 12 assaults in the direction of Velika Novosyolka. In this way, they are trying to cut off logistics for the Ukrainian armed forces, which are holding positions in the Kurakhove area. Spokesman for the Southern Defense Forces, Vlad Voloshin. That is, the Ukrainian armed forces continue not only shelling, but also assaults. They are carried out in small infantry groups of 5 to 10 people, but armored fighting vehicles are used to deliver and support actions. In the remaining directions, Gulyapol and Orakhovo, the enemy is preparing for an assault, replenishing ammunition and engineering reconnaissance, and also trying to conduct reconnaissance in force, Voloshin added. Situation in the South Donetsk direction. In the Vremevsky sector, heavy fighting continues on the Novodorovka-Ravnopol-Makarovka line. Here, the Ukrainian armed forces do not abandon their attempts to dislodge Russian advanced units from the occupied settlements or what is left of them. If in the Ravnopol area they manage to move the Ukrainian armed forces a little to the north, then in Makarovka, the Ukrainian armed forces are trying every day to roll up to the northern outskirts of the village, where they are buried in basements and on the approaches. Thus, this morning, one of the Ukrainian armed forces groups was unable to reach the village. It was dispersed on the approach. A similar situation is in Trudov. Over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces lost at least 3 armored vehicles, on which they were throwing infantry groups into the village. Some of these groups were destroyed, some were driven into basements. In addition, the weather factor is increasingly playing a role. With the onset of late autumn, there are more cloudy, overcast days, which complicates the work of drone operators on both sides. This helps reduce the intensity of hostilities. Battle for Kurakhove. Regarding the information, 5.5 kilometers left before the closure of the AFU in Kurakhove. Spread by a well-known German publication. Yesterday, it was reported that new units arrived in the direction to maintain the situation in the half-boilers. In connection with this, it was possible to temporarily stop the Russian armed forces south of the village of Suki Yali. No withdrawals are planned. Alongside us, the 33rd, 79th and 241st Brigades are fighting at the limit of their capabilities. At the same time, the fighting on the southern face of the Kurakhove direction shifted towards the village of Rozdolnoye, where the Russian armed forces were able to advance and gain a foothold. The exit to the village of Bogatyr after Rozdolnoye will allow the occupiers to partially solve the issue of destroying the rear communications of the AFU units in Kurakhove. Another option would be to capture Velikaya Novoselka from the north, cutting the route to Bogatyr. Unfortunately, the Russian armed forces are increasingly using their advantage, a great variability of actions in any direction convenient for them. In general, the situation in the direction is extremely difficult. All units have switched to the mode of conducting rearguard battles. In this regard, information on the topic 5.5 kilometers to the AFU boiler is of a speculative clickbait nature, which does not characterize the situation. Situation southwest of Donetsk, Russian army made new advances southwest of Pobjeda, reaching the northern outskirts of Ilinka. Russians captured Novoilinka. Kurakhove direction, the Russian armed forces occupied Novoselidivka, Petrivka, Pokrovka direction, and most of Berestki. Ukrainian control in Berestki is no more than 20%.